Hi everyone, this is Freddie with Superbike Unlimited, and it's been a long time since I said this, but we're bringing you an update on our V4R Superbike project. And today, actually, this is an upgrade that we've been wanting to do for a while. We've just been so busy with our other stuff here at the shop, we haven't had time. But we are upgrading our STM clutch, which is factory, of course, to this very nice Suter piece. And we're going to show that Tex was just pointing out that there's some work that's involved. Essentially, this is an OEM component here that's got a bearing and what would you call that? A bushing?
That's the basically the throw-out bearing.
Okay, so this has to be pressed from this billet component and reused per the documentation that comes with the clutch. Pressed into here. So okay, so it gets pressed in. So that this is not necessarily as direct of a swap as we see with some of the other stuff because of that. They didn't provide that component. Perhaps in an effort to keep the cost reasonable, this is actually a pretty affordable clutch for this application. And we've worked with Suter this was actually the first prototype. We've worked with them to find a setting that would be really close right out of the box. So I'm excited to test this thing. And in the past, for me, going to a Suter has always been a really positive upgrade. Generally speaking, I find that they're more durable, they feel better on decel, and I just like them. So we're gonna go ahead and pop that in, and we've got a few other little updates for this guy that are coming, so more on that later, but first let's get this Suter in. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the documentation. This shows what we're referring to where the OEM component as marked has to be pressed out. Also, it outlines some of the springs that are provided. It's kind of interesting because the ratings of these are kind of different from what we're used to seeing. So the standard torque limiter spring that comes with this is a 1500 Newton. That's what we're going to start with, just because that's the one that they've sent. We're going to take the others just in case when we're testing. And we have a whole range of these here, so we'll have much more than we'll ever need. But I generally like to find, I do often pick a more aggressive torque limiter spring, a higher value, and do more control with the engine braking. But I like to start with what Suter recommends. So if we put this in and I don't like it as much, what I'll probably, because of course with us running a standalone ECU, we have absolute control of the engine braking strategy. So what I'm going to do is just start with what they provided, see how it feels. If for some reason it doesn't feel the way I'm looking, then quite simply I'll go up to a really high one, probably something like probably somewhere around 1900 Newton, and kind of do it the way I have traditionally, control a lot of it through the ECU. So we're going to start with this though and see how it feels. All right, so we're getting everything together. This is the old assembly. We're just going to keep that like this in case we need to swap it back in if for some reason we don't like the feeling, or if we have an issue or something like that with this other clutch that we're testing. And what we found is they did send us a stack we were going to test, but we couldn't get to the spec that we needed with it. So we're actually going to use another one that we have, and it is within the spec. There's basically a range. It's very important that you stay within. Here it's listed as 37.5 millimeters plus 0.2 minus 0.4. So you can go 37.1 to 37.7. That's kind of you can't deviate from that. And we have optional plates, but we just couldn't get there with the stack they sent us. So we have another one. Must be slightly smaller fibers. It has to be because we measured all the steels, and we're just going to run that. And here you can see this throwout bearing, and you can see it's not pressed in, so this can easily just come right back out. It was so this is something that shouldn't be actually much of an issue for you guys to do at home. This is a plate that's provided that has to go in first. And you can note the difference, the fact that it's dimpled. It's because it's going to get a lot of oil in there. I say that, watch this thing blow up.
Give me any ideas.
Yeah, this is... it's interesting because this might be kind of winding down for us with the V4, because it's about that time for us to start a new project, and we don't know if we're going to actually keep this bike for next year. So those of you who've been watching this, if you're interested in this motorcycle in a serious way, and you better have a real budget, then reach out to us, because we might be selling this bike at the end of the year. We have to move on every year to a new project, especially once we've kind of sort of reach some limits to what we plan to do for the motorcycle. And since we don't want to go into the motor for this thing, it's plenty fast as it is. We have a few other cool things we're going to do before the season's over, and probably before we race it again. We have a couple of subframes. One of them in particular is very interesting. We're gonna get on there, but after that, I mean, we're really we're running out of things to do on this, and it's about time we have another special project in mind. So there's a chance this thing might be up for sale. So what are we measuring now? Texas is the final step of setting this up.
This is setting the travel that on the how far the slipper clutch can open is controlled by how deep these bolts go. So you want it to, according to the ramp we have in here, you want it to open 1.2 to 1.4 millimeters. So we're going to use this, which is a 10 millimeter thick spacer. You put it in there, you measure the depth, you take out the width of the spacer, you take out the length of the bolt, and what's left is your gap. And then you change the spacers under the bolts using varying size shims to set the gap to the 1.2 to 1.4 that we need.
All right, so we're getting 35.4, and we subtract 10 millimeters, which puts us at 25.4. And then what was the length of that?
24.
So that gives us a 1.44 value. Since that's slightly outside the range, we're just going to go ahead and put one of these shims in there, which is a 0.2. So that'll get us to 1.24, right, pretty close to the middle, and then we'll be well within spec. And then this thing should be ready to go. All right, so before this goes together, Tex is going to point out something that if any of you guys get one of these, is really important because it could screw up the way the clutch goes on.
Okay, so this has got the little machine holes in the back of it to fit these tabs. And if you notice, one of them has a groove machined into it. None of the other ones have that one. And if you look at these, this one has a groove machined into it. So you need to make sure that this hole is on that tab, and then it'll seat like it's supposed to.
So if you don't do this, we'll turn it to another one. See what happens is, even though it looks like it's flush, there's a big gap here, whereas down here it looks, okay. So this is what you want to avoid. You cannot put it together that way. Probably cause all kinds of problems. So that's what you're looking for, a nice snug fit. All right, so that is installed. Everything looks good, nice and shiny. And obviously now the big test is going to be, how does it feel on the track? I feel pretty good about it. Like I said before, Suter has always felt awesome to me, and we've tested just about every clutch that you can think of across our other motorcycles, from EVR, STM, Yoyodyne. They've all been good, but Suter for us has been the best. So we're going to go ahead and put that back together. And at the same time, of course, Tex is just doing some prep. We're getting ready to put this thing back on the racetrack, so it needs brake calipers. We actually stole those for the ZX10 to let our rider test both. And we're going to put some fresh fluids in it. Of course, we use Motul 300V, and the factory weight, whatever. What is it? What is this thing called for?
1550.
1550. So that's what we're using, in case you're wondering. That's going to go in there. We love Motul stuff. And next up is some subframe stuff. So we'll one of them is going to be a little tricky. I'm hoping we can make it all work with what we've got going on back here. And the other one is basically just an updated version of this. So we've got two, and hopefully we can make the nicer of the two go on. We'll show you what we're talking about here in a few. All right, so we're back at it, and as you can see, there is stuff missing from the motorcycle now. This is a clear sign of what we're going towards. And what we've got here is actually super cool. This is a carbon fiber monocoque tail section. So this is kind of like what we run on the ZX10, sort of, although it doesn't include a seat unit. But these two components will replace, basically, where is everything? Some of it's put away already.
And then these pieces over here.
It's gonna replace the tail frame, or excuse me, the subframe assembly, as well as all this stuff here. So, well, actually everything you see here. So this simplifies things. So undertail, this sort of heat shield component, tail section, and then subframe. So that's the idea. Is it's just going to tidy everything up. It's going to weigh less. What we'll do is we'll weigh these items. Here we're going to lay out everything that we have and just do a quick weight comparison of original versus new. I think it'll be interesting to see kind of where we end up. It certainly seems as though there's going to be, you know what, that's going to be tricky. I'm going to put something on this one. Okay, so we've gotten everything onto the scale here, and we've got 2,628 grams, or 2.6 kilograms. So that's, we put one of our carbon trays on there, and now we'll just pop this off and make sure that it still shows 0. And it does. And then we'll put our new stuff on. These mounting brackets have to be accounted for, of course, and naturally we're using titanium bolts to affix them to the motorcycle. So we had 2,600. It certainly feels lighter. 1,584, so basically a wow, full kilogram approximately. So right at 2.2 pounds lighter by going to this setup. I think it's going to be worth the effort, although it's not going to be easy for us. The biggest concern that we have is, of course, this area. So back here we have, this is how the exhaust mounts is to that section back there. Otherwise we wouldn't even use that. And here, it's like just nothing there. So that's going to be a little tricky, and we're going to have to cut holes. You know, it's not going to be optimal kind of hacking up a nice piece like this, but if we want to make it work, we don't have a choice. So we're going to proceed with that. We'll mount everything up, and then we'll probably have to create some hardware, so that weight differential may be a little different. I wouldn't be surprised, Tex is coming back, I wouldn't be surprised if we wound up having to add maybe an ounce or two of aluminum or steel or something like that to make sure we have our bracket sorted. But either way, it's going to be a considerable weight loss, and it definitely looks cooler. So there's something to be said for that. So Tex has done a fine job of working this up. Essentially what you're seeing in here is a sort of a support bracket to distribute some load, because basically the weight of this monocoque is now supporting that exhaust system, which is fortunately quite light. So we've got a couple of tie bolts there with sort of like an aluminum plate. And then here you can see where he's made some threaded standoffs to keep everything mounted. And then on this side, Tex was just commenting that it's really tight trying to put the heat shield that he's got here on. So we might have a little clearancing to do. I'm tempted to just put it on and let it vibrate itself clear, but we might wind up just clearancing that just a touch, just because we don't want to do things too I don't know what the word is, inappropriately. So everything's looking pretty good. It looks like it's going to work. We weren't so sure that it was going to be easy, but Tex is really good at coming up with solutions for these kinds of problems, and looks like we're going to be able to rock this thing. So that's exciting. That's another, I think we're going to do a weigh-in on this bike. It's been a while since we've done one. Now that we're pretty much at minimum weight, we do currently have our iron discs on, so this isn't going to be the lightest spec that it possibly could be. We could throw those carbons on with the carbon wheels. Might be worth doing just to see where we're at. But yeah, I think this is pretty cool. I really like this. We love these things on the ZX because they're super rigid. You feel everything, and of course it's much lighter. All right, so we've got the subframe all mounted up. Tex did a great job of doing all the final configuration there, and we'll just go ahead and show you what we've got. This is what it looks like installed. I think honestly it looks really nice. It nicely closes up the lines. Just the shape and everything, I feel like accentuates the look of the V4, so I'm really happy with it. You can really see the way it works back here. That's our little mount up in there. I think that's going to be interesting to see how this holds up. We're going to keep a close eye on that. That exhaust has always been kind of wobbly like that, so that's nothing new, but has a lot to do with the way it mounts. Sorry about that. Battery died again. This thing is notorious for just munching batteries. But anyway, has to do with the way this is mounted. You know, long term, I would like to change that because I really don't think it's the best solution. And I don't mean what we've done. I mean the way Termi intends for people to mount this exhaust system. It's just not as secure as what I would like. And I've seen on the World Superbike systems, when I say systems, I mean this exhaust, but with their subframe, they use these in here to further secure the exhaust. Makes sense because obviously you don't want this thing coming off. A lot of speed involved and cost. So maybe we'll find a way to utilize that. It's going to be tricky. This subframe is nothing like the factory ones. So we'll have to see. But regardless, we lost, you know, a full kilo, and man, this thing looks great. Really aggressive, super sleek. I think it's a really nice piece. We're going to polish it up a little bit just because it does have kind of a dull finish out of the box, but it looks really good overall. I'm happy with it. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and pop this thing on the scales. So we're also in the next video, we're going to go full carbon. I'm not going to do that for now. We just don't have time, and I want to get this up for you guys. But the next one, we have some other stuff coming, and we're going to do full carbon spec. So obviously now we basically have everything that we can other than the rear disc. I haven't purchased one of those. But we're going to go carbon wheels, carbon brake discs, and weigh it in that spec. So it'll be interesting to see what we get now versus what we're going to get then. So next up, we're going to weigh this thing, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, so we've got this guy on the scales. We're using our intercoms, which are guaranteed to be within 1%. Very accurate weigh system. We do have a tank of fuel, and we have the bigger battery in it right now. So let's see where we're at. 383 pounds. Okay, so now we know where we are. Honestly, I have no idea where it was before. I don't remember. We'll watch the video and we'll come back and comment on that. All right, so while we're doing this, one thing we can have a look at that I think is interesting is we can look at the bias, which it showed a minute ago. So we can see that it's got a 53.6% front bias, which comes out to 46.3. How is that coming out that way? Oh, excuse me, 53.65 in the front and 46.35 in the rear. So that's just an interesting observation. I'm going to compare that to the stock bike here in a moment, but good to see. Alrighty, I just went back and watched actually our very first video about this project, and we saw the weight and it was in the mid 430s. So we have lost 50 pounds from stock, which is pretty damn good, I think, honestly, especially considering that right now the bike has, you know, alloy wheels and it has a iron discs. So it'll be interesting to see, which we're gonna make you wait until the next video, of course, to see what the all carbon spec is. But I think maybe another 10 pounds or so. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Minus 50 on a bike with this level of electronics. I mean, you have to keep in mind, we've added, of course, we've subtracted a lot, but we've also added a lot. We have way more sophisticated electronics on this motorcycle. We have a ton of sensors. Obviously, we have 4 Lambda sensors now. These kind of things really add up. But it just goes to show you the value of using titanium everywhere, using carbon fiber where possible, and just having a very strong approach to weight reduction. And again, that's with our big battery in there. We could actually knock another pound off of this thing like that just by putting in one of our smaller batteries, because of course we've got this jumper here. We can use a jumper battery. This is set up now to where we don't have to use that. It's not a big issue. So cool. Well, I think that's going to do it for this one. I really appreciate you guys watching these. I hope you enjoyed this video. We're going to have some cool updates in the next one. We're hoping, weather permitting, we might be able to test this motorcycle this month. It's going to be iffy because it looks like it might be too cold, but we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll be able to make it out there. So hopefully the next one we might have some track footage. Either way, once again, thank you guys very much for watching our channel. Really appreciate it. Be sure to like this video, comment below, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you next time.